Hello everyone and welcome to this Human Performance Oil and Gas webinar, Human Performance in Investigations. My name is Brodie Smith and I represent HPOG. During this webinar, we are going to explore how integrating human performance into the investigations process can actually work in practice and the available tools that can help support you. As we go along, please do not hesitate to pop any comments into the chat box and questions in there as well. We will look to answer questions near the end of the session. I now have the pleasure of introducing Dr. Marcin Nazaruk. He is the Human Performance and Culture Leader for Baker Hughes, Human Factors Technical Section Chairperson for the SPE, and member of the HPOG Steering Committee. Marcin, thank you for joining us, and over to you.
Thank you very much, Brodie. And welcome, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, wherever you are. Today, I'd like to share some information about human performance in investigation, and we'll use a case study of a dropped object to work through it together. Before we go to our case study, I'd like to share a few words about my background so you know where I'm coming from and where my perspective is coming from. So in my practice, I connect multiple perspectives and specialisms. I'm qualified safety professional. I'm technically trained in different types of psychology, including cognitive, occupational, industrial, behavioral. I also have business and management background and system thinking, and all those elements get connected together in my practical application. My professional experience comes from multiple industries, oil and gas, power generation, heavy manufacturing. But for the purposes of our discussion today, it's perhaps worth highlighting that I was a global advisor for the human factors in investigations for BP. I also co-wrote guidance on HF in investigations for IOGP. I designed human performance competency pathway, now published by the Energy Institute, with a subsection focused on investigation specifically, and I'm the lead author of the pre-accident investigation guidance that will be published by IOGP later this year. And all those different experiences resulted in multiple industry awards. A few words about HPOG. HPOG is collaborative and independent forum focused on developing accessible guidance and practical resources. And the vision is to create a standardized and universal suite of resources, as well as online repository, becoming a one-stop shop for all needs related to human performance. And we've got a number of large organizations already on board, and we'll still inviting members to join us in this effort. I'll mention more about that at the end. One of the main outputs of HPOG is so-called recommended practice. This aims to be a guidance on how to implement human performance program in order to reduce risk and increase efficiency. And that recommended practice will focus on 9 topics or 9 sections. And what I would like to highlight is the structure of each section using the human performance in investigation chapter in particular. So each topic here has 3 parts to accommodate different levels of maturity and of the companies who are interested in implementing that. So at level 1, as expressed in words of the end user or the HSE manager who is interested in this topic, at level 1, I would like to apply something ad hoc with minimal preparation. And so the guidance is provided to address that need. At level 2, the manager may say, I know the basics, but I would like to make it systematic. So by integrating this with existing process. At level 3, the message or the request is, I would like to align all relevant processes to make this effort self-sustainable. And so for each of those levels, we've got subsections. So we provide some guidance on stakeholders and who should be involved. What do you need to know? What do you need to do? And the resources that will support you. So that's HPOG at a high level. And now let's talk about our case study. Before I show you a video, a couple words of introduction. First of all, this is not an investigation training. Of course, couldn't be in 45 minutes or so. And so what that means for us is I will not cover many topics, and some of the topics will be simplified for the purposes of learning together. Secondly, the goal for today is to provoke thinking and get you started. And it may be that as we go through the scenario that I'm going to show you, we may see things differently, and that's okay. Let's learn from each other. But later on, I'll also elaborate why it may be that despite seeing the same content, we may interpret it differently. The video I'm going to show you has been created with help of volunteers. And so as we watch the story, please focus on the story aspect that we are telling. And finally, I would like to analyze and interpret that story together with you. And so to help with that, I've got a few exercises prepared. Because of the nature of the webinar, we won't be able to easily discuss it in small groups, for example. But what I would like you to do is to have a pen and paper ready so that you can participate in those exercises while we can move swiftly through the sections. Okay. So with all this said, let's jump to our case study, and we'll discuss it after. So this is about 5 minutes now, so please enjoy.
There he is.
How you doing, guys? I'm the Julian Superintendent.
Thank you, sir. I'm JJ. This is Terry. What you got planned for us today?
Well, I'm glad to see you here. First thing, I hope you got all your stuff ready, and we'll have the hanger out tonight. After that, it's on you guys to pull that string of casing. Once we get the hanger out, rig up your tongs, make sure they're ready. This 5.5 casing is flash connections, Nix Premium thread. So I hope you got everything that we're gonna need for that.
Sure we do. But we were told that this was a standard job for a standard casing thread. Is it not? Your engineers never really sent us any technical details, only an email to mobilize.
I have the technical data here. That's a 5.5 flash joint casing with Nix OP1 connections for sure. Is that a problem?
We may be missing a lifting nubbing. I don't really remember pulling any flush casing out of this rig. It's not something we carry standard on an everyday job. I have taken a little look into it, but other than that, I'll get my night shift to rig up the hydraulic casing tongs, any other equipment we need, and when we're ready, the day shift will pull out the hole.
Okay, since y'all don't have the nabbing, I think we do, but let me know at the soonest. We don't want any surprises. Okay. With that out of the way, let's have our safety meeting with the crew.
Okay, gentlemen, last but not least, while we're tripping out of the hole, stay away from the redstone so that nothing falls from above and strikes you. We all worked around rigs, so you know what can happen.
All right, guys, for this job, we'll be using the lifting nubbing to pull a flush joint. The lifting nubbing only has to be hand tight. This is Nix threading, so it doesn't require much torque. Make sure you keep your hands on the safety handles and away from the tongs at all times. Got it?
Got it. Okay, I see it. Here it is. Here's the 5.5-inch nubbing for the Nix thread. We don't use them all the time, but we do keep them around.
Okay, it does look like a Nix thread. Here's the serial number stamp right here. I'm sure you guys have the valid certificate for this.
We sure do, somewhere in the back of the office. You know the rules around here. Nothing without a piece of paper.
Yes, I do. Don't worry, sir. I'll ask you if I need them.
Hey, what's going on? I can't break this connection.
What's wrong, guys?
Not enough torque. These tongues seem to not be getting enough hydraulic power. Got any ideas?
Our rig tongues are rigged up and ready to go. Besides, they're much more powerful. And we'll also save time by not having to change the tongues.
Yeah, well, if you're good with it, I'm good with it.
I'm good with it. Let's get it done.
Let's do it. It's not going any further. Is it shoulder to shoulder yet?
No, not really. It's still showing a small gap. What do we do now?
I think they said they had another nubbin. I'll grab that. Or maybe we can complete the makeup.
Okay, let's get it.
Okay.
What's the holdup, guys?
I can't get the new nubbin in. See? Still the gap.
Are these shoulders supposed to meet up? What is the tolerance for this premium connection?
Our procedure don't say anything about an allowance, just the makeup connection.
Or what's the problem? The knobbin or the box?
Who knows? Dirty threads?
Did you guys clean up the threads? Maybe it will help.
We did not. It worked fine. We only cleaned them when we run it in the hole. I'll do it for the next one. I mean, it had several gaps like that for a few joints, but this nubbin should hold up with no issue.
Well, these connections usually don't make up all the way in most cases. So why don't we just give it a go and get it all over with?
The casing!
Stop the job! JJ, are you okay?
Man, it almost hit you.
Okay, so let's pause briefly here, and if I may ask you to take your pen and paper now and write down a few words reflecting on your thoughts on why you believe this incident happened. Write down why it happened. Okay, that will be important as we continue our journey of exploring what lies beneath. So to continue, now let's watch part 2 of the video.
Hey, good news. We just won a tender for the well recovery operations. Easy job, good profit.
Is it that call-out contract with the 48-hour notice we discussed the other day?
Yes.
You know the notice time's extremely short, and we're going to be busy this year. I'm scared we're not going to have the equipment or personnel to do the job when they call.
You're always complaining. It's a standard job, and our account manager is at the customer's office every day, so we're going to find out about any changes well in advance. Plus, I checked the rig schedule. We've got at least 8 months before we have to get started. They still have to complete their exploration campaign, so we've got plenty of time.
Thanks for finally calling me back. Yes, we have a change of plan with the 10N and Y rig. The well recovery operations will happen sooner than expected. I know, but the decision was made by headquarters, so just plan your operations accordingly. Oh, I need to call that service company. I almost forgot. But it's too late now. Shh. I'll just call them tomorrow. I'm sure they're ready for this call-out contract. They should be just waiting and expecting our call anyway.
Hey, I just got a call. We got to be on location at 5 p.m. tomorrow sharp.
What? I got no crews. All my crews are out. I got very little equipment in the yard. And I don't know, I think we should talk to the managing director. What do you think?
Sounds like a good idea. Let's go do it. Hey, can we talk to you for a second?
Sure. Come on in, guys.
Hey, we've got some concerns.
Okay.
We're having some equipment and a few personal issues, and I just don't think we can do it.
Oh, come on, guys. We need the revenue off of this job to offset the revenue loss off of the canceled exploration campaign. If we say no, they're going to go to the secondary contractor, and we're going to lose the entire project. I know you guys. You guys can find a solution. This is an easy one. Let's just get it done.
Okay.
Can I come and see you?
Sure, come on in.
Hey, did you receive the pre-job work order yet with all the technical information?
Not exactly. I did get an email that we need to be ready tomorrow. They haven't sent over the pre-job work order yet, but this is a fairly standard job. We've done 25 of these wells in the same field last year, so we'll just collect the form later. We just got to get moving on this. You did organize the equipment and the personnel. We're ready to go, right?
Well, I called 3 operators from the days off. I promoted JJ to crew supervisor, and Terry, the workshop foreman, I'm sending also as an additional crew member.
Does JJ and Terry have the proper training?
Terry did this job 8 years ago when he was in the field. He's a very experienced guy, and I think he can back up JJ if needed.
So what about the equipment?
I prepared a package for a standard job. I used last year's list. The drilling manager didn't give me any additional information. I think we should be fine. He said he was too busy to organize a new program.
Have you done a kickoff meeting to discuss the job yet?
No, not yet. I haven't had time. Our crew will travel to the location from wherever they are. Otherwise, they're going to delay the rig. They'll just have to try to find time when they get to location to do it.
There he is.
How you doing, guys?
We come back to the beginning of the story that you already know. So having watched part 2, may I ask you again to write down a few words why you believe this incident happened in light of the information that you've seen in video 2. And also, now, having reflected on what you wrote after the first video and after the second video, is there a difference in your conclusions or observations? And if so, is there more to it than simply the fact that we showed you more information? Every job in high-risk environments is complex. There are unknowns, dependencies, conflicting priorities, trade-offs, resource constraints, surprises, pressures, relationships, adaptations, changes, goal conflicts, and dilemmas. When something undesired happens, we get a group of people to look into that situation, to explain what happened and how it happened and why it happened. And so every person will come to this with their background, experience, mindset, assumptions, and beliefs. If we did a roundtable, and if I asked you on this webinar to tell us what you wrote after the first video and what you wrote after the second video, we would probably see that different people wrote different things. And this is what we see when we do this workshop internally. So why would that be? Why, despite seeing exactly the same information, different people conclude different things? And so the investigation and learning is not an objective discovery of reality. It's a subjective negotiation of the mental models and mindset and assumptions, beliefs that particular group of people bring together to that process of learning. And so my goal for today will be to expand that circle. I've got a circle, you've got a circle. So we'll try to expand that a little bit. And what is also important here, that as we learn about the event from our own perspective, we then turn that insight into words, reports, or PowerPoint presentations, which simplifies the complexity of job even further for people who receive the final output. And that creates additional challenges, which I'll also talk a little bit more about later. Before we get into the next step of analysis of that scenario together, I'd like to get us on the same page with some basic terminology that I will use throughout our work. So first of all, what do we mean by human performance? So human performance is about what people do and how they do it. Think about JJ, what he did, how he did it. But it's not limited to frontline employees. Think about the director or the coordinator. What they did, how they did it is described as human performance. Now, what people do is influenced by a range of different things, and we call those things human factors or error traps. But please note the language used here. What people do is influenced. The word is not caused. So this will be an important distinction for us, cause and influence later on. And for now, let me just highlight that if you think about fatigue as a factor that influences behavior, I'm sure that you've got experience of, for example, driving while being tired. And probably most of the time, or maybe never, it resulted in an accident. Can we say that fatigue causes car crashes? Given that most of the time it does not, that's difficult. Can we say that fatigue increases the likelihood or influences the likelihood? That's probably more comfortable to accept that. And now that's not the end with error traps, because if we think about error traps, we may ask, where do they come from? And so error traps result from processes, policies, and structures in place, and we call these organizational factors. And we will look into those in a bit more detail. So thinking about JJ and the challenges that he faced on the job, let's reflect on some error traps that were there. Here I'm showing you a simple and short list of some error traps taken from different industry guidance and materials, and this is not a comprehensive list. But what we've got here is procedure that is unclear or not available, didn't have the information they needed, insufficient knowledge, training, or experience, tools or time or other resources not available, fatigue, stress, confusing design, poor supervision, ongoing change, communications, or different aspects of the ambient environment. Just to start with, please note that those items are numbered. Okay, so please prepare your pen and paper again and write down the numbers of the error traps that you believe influenced JJ and contributed to the situation. Okay, So the error traps are those factors that influence what people do and increase the likelihood of error on compliance. But also that is happening in the context of organization. So this means that there are other people that have influence over those error traps. So thinking about people that you've seen in the video, and here I've got the list and their pictures. Please now note down the numbers of the roles that you believe contributed to the error traps that JJ faced. Okay. And finally, let's look into some organizational factors. So this is if we have an error trap in place. So let's say procedure was out of date or procedure was incorrect. The question would be, how come an organization allowed for that document, which typically is a form of control, risk control or risk reduction aid or measure, how come an organization allowed for that procedure to be out of date? And so here we start touching on processes and policies and structures. So for example, for procedures, this may be procedure management system, which describes how documents are written, how often they're being revised, who should be involved in the revision and providing feedback, etc. How easy it is to give feedback from the end by the end users, etc. The same with competence and training. If we say, okay, competency was not sufficient or the experience was not there, perhaps it is the competency management system that provides that framework for ensuring that the people have the competencies for the roles, and so on. And so we've got staffing and workload management and planning processes, design requirements and processes, change management, procurement-related processes, supervision, or conflicting priorities. So thinking about the error traps that you've identified, now write down the numbers of the organizational factors that you believe contributed. Some of them might not have been explicitly presented in the video, and that's fine. Feel free to make some assumptions about what might have contributed, even though perhaps not shown in the video. Okay, so now the next question is, again, is there a difference between what you wrote initially after watching part 1 and part 2 and what you wrote down now using the prompts of error traps and organizational factors I displayed? And this takes us to an important point, that what you look for is what you find. I'll mention that in a moment as well. But let's now let me share a preview that I would have done. This is not a comprehensive analysis, but I cherry-picked and simplified some points for simplicity purposes. But I highlight some of the things. And again, you may compare if what I got is whether it overlaps or not with what you've got. So well, let's start with some error traps. Thinking about the scene where JJ is standing next to that basket with tools, and he picks up a nubbing, looks at it, and says, okay, looks like a correct nubbing. Okay, although it wasn't correct, it looked like a correct one. So we've got visual similarity of object. In the research from the nuclear industry, visual similarity of objects such as buttons or tools significantly increases the likelihood of a person making an error. So if this is an error trap, then the question is, who contributed to that error trap? And we could think about a product engineer or nubbing manufacturers. You could think about some other people as well. And what may be an example of organizational factors? You've got design requirements. So whether did designers think about reducing error by using principles of design? So that would be one consideration. Then you've got procurement requirements. So if that nubbin or a series of nubbins of different types was bought, would the procurement requirements account for the need to error-proof the how those are being used in practice to reduce the likelihood of failure? So that's one example. Let's see some others. So procedure availability or information inside the procedure. When they were struggling with the connection, they said that the procedure doesn't say anything about the torque values. So here, who contributed? You've got ops coordinator, you've got tool pusher, and organizational factor, you've got document management system. Training and competency, you will have competency manager. We didn't see that in the video, but you can assume that if there is competency management and framework in place, then somebody would be managing that. And finally, you've got time constraint, which is a very common one. And here you've got the drilling manager or the managing director, and we'll elaborate their roles in a moment. And here we've got planning processes or terms of contract. This particular type of analysis is based on the template that is part of the human performance competency pathway in the module focused on incident investigations. So just presented slightly differently here, but this is based on that guidance. What this also shows here is that we moved away from JJ towards number of people who contributed in different ways. And let's explore that further. What I'm going to show you is another tool, which is fairly simple to use, which is called Influence Map. And so this tool aims to visualize the different people who were involved in the situation and articulate how those different people influenced the situation. So we start with JJ and selecting a wrong nubbin. So we've got the ops coordinator who created a job package using outdated specification. Now, can you say that the ops coordinator caused JJ to select a wrong nubbin? That's difficult to agree. Now, can you say that the difficulties that the ops coordinator faced by not having the needed information contributed and influenced the situation so that JJ selected a wrong nubbin? That's probably more acceptable. Now, and of course, that is not the end of the story. We've got the drilling manager who did not provide the pre-job work order and specification. You've got competency manager who did not cover nubbin types or torque requirements in the training. And you've got general director who agreed the terms of contract and determined the resources available. Is it cause or influence? Is it cause or dependency? Now, the important factor or important insight here is that using the language of causes works well for simple mechanical systems where the causality is deterministic. So, or for example, you've got an engine, one piece or one part breaks, engine stops, you replace that part, engine starts. Every time where you either remove or damage that part, the outcome is the same, the engine stops working. Talking about causes as applied to human behavior or organizations is simply not effective, because if you wanted to ask what was the cause of JJ's selection of an incorrect numbing, it would be very difficult to say that general director or the ops coordinator caused it. Now, if you think about influence or contribution, you can account for that. And so when it comes to analyzing and understanding organizations, language does matter. And we did an internal test. We had an incident and we analyzed it using two different methods. One was using the causal language. So what was the cause? Trying to find a selection of root causes. And then the other way, when we reviewed the same incident by the same team using the language of influence and different type of questions, what made it difficult, what set them up for failure, what contributed. And it turned out that the latter one, the second one, with the language around influence, resulted in bigger number of insights, and also insights more at the organizational level, while the causes were very were surrounding factors immediately around the person who triggered the incident. So the important conclusion here that the language of causes may actually prevent us from effective learning in complex organizations. Another way of thinking about decisions I'd like to show you is so-called operational dilemma. A dilemma is a situation where a person has two or more choices, and each choice has some sort of undesired outcomes or implications. So here we've got a simple table, and we've got the in the column we've got the behavior and implications, and the row at the top we've got actual behavior and alternative behavior. So let's see how we could look into that. So let's start with the actual behavior. Is JJ selected and used incorrect? Now, thinking about his situation and trying to put ourselves in his shoes, we may come back to the scene, him standing next to the basket. And so what he's doing, he's looking at the part, using his knowledge and experience and saying, yeah, this looks right. And then he's having the tool pusher next to him who says, yeah, confirming, yes, it is right. And also providing this authority that there is a paperwork or certificate in place. So now they will face a dilemma, right? So they didn't see, JJ did not see the certificate, but having visual inspection and having the confirmation from the customer now is perhaps sufficient to reassure him that it's fine. But there are advantages to now proceeding with work, because they can start immediately and then avoid the cost of non-productive time, unhappy customer, and late working. But now let's reflect on what would be the cost of the alternative. And because I don't mean financial cost, although that may be part of it, but the implications of the alternative choice. So the alternative may be verify if the nubbing time was correct. So here, in that moment in time, you have to find the certificate, right? So now they have to go back to the office, but there is now uncertainty in that point in time. There's uncertainty is where exactly is that certificate and how much time it will take to find it. Maybe it is in place and somewhere easily accessible, and maybe it will be just half an hour to get there, although still you've got that half an hour delay. But what if I cannot easily find it? What if I need to start going through the documentation and going through the old folders? Or what if it's not there? What if it's in the office? What if I need to start calling people, try to locate it? And that moment in time, they don't know. And so it may be 30 minutes delay, it may be a day of delay, or maybe they won't be able to find it at all if the tool pusher was incorrect. So in that situation, they're weighing the options, trying to make the best decisions that make sense given the circumstances. And so as they're weighing the options, they're deciding, given the constraints and given the implications of the alternative and the costs of alternative, what is the best way forward? And I really like this quote from Professor Decker, saying that decision-making calls for judgment under uncertainty, ambiguity, and time pressure. Options that appear to work are better than perfect options that never get analyzed. And reasoning in complex systems is governed by people's local understanding, their focus of attention, and existing knowledge. And what matters for them is that the decision mostly works in their situation. And in this quote, he's referring to a cognitive mechanism called satisficing, but I won't go into technical details around that. But we saw perhaps how JJ's decision was making sense to him at that time, even though in hindsight, having bigger picture, we see how it contributed to the situation. So this is a very simple example of human factors analysis. What I would like to also highlight is some other aspects of introducing HF analysis to organization and some examples of what good looks like. So HF analysis is a part of the incident investigation process, specifically focused on explaining how context and organization influence people's decisions and behavior. And so here I'm going to show you some indicators of good practice. So you can compare what you know about your organization with this and be able to make a judgment of whether you're doing it or not. So if your investigation reports includes factors that influenced behavior and organizational factors explaining why the error traps were there, count for dependencies between different people and processes, and highlights and explains the implications of alternative choices, provides the rich description that allows the reader who was not involved in investigation, but just reading the output, to appreciate the context and the situation. And finally, that discussion is applied to multiple people. So the frontline employee who was the closest to the incident is not the only person whose perspective is explored. So this is what good looks like. Now, I've got also some examples and indicators of perhaps showing that that there is still some work to do. So if your reports show that there is one root cause, there is work to be done. If you see things like human error, human behavior, or non-compliance as highlighted as a root cause or one of the causes, again, some additional work is needed. Judgmental labels such as complacency, recklessness, laziness, or even some focusing on biases and saying that the root cause was a bias needs some work. And the reason for it is that by doing so, by using those labels, you isolate the person from their environment and how the situation was unfolding over time. And then if you focus only on what the person didn't do or should have done, also indicates that there is opportunity for improvement. And although there may be value in answering what the person didn't do or should have done, just focusing on this does not answer what the person actually did and why they did it. Another element is that HF, although we highlighted a couple tools, HF analysis is not limited to using the tools. And in fact, the considerations on what influence behavior and dependencies, etc., should be integrated into all phases of the investigation process. And so here I'm showing the key phases based on the IOGP guidance. And so even from the very beginning, even before the investigation starts, but you've just learned about the incident, you start mobilizing and planning, it's important to start planning for how you are going to collect information about error traps, about policies, organizational factors, etc. Then, as you collect your evidence, and yes, there are different types of evidence that collected differently, I get that. When you interview, you need to ask questions about the context, about why it made sense, error traps, etc. And the techniques and how you do it, that's probably a topic for another separate webinar in its own right. Then the analysis, when you pull things, put things together and connect the dots and build a bigger picture, think influence, interactions, and dependencies rather than simple cause and effect in binary terms. And doing so will more likely give you new and fresh lines of inquiry and will open up influences at the organizational level. When you write your findings, tell a story and avoid judgmental labels. For example, saying that the root cause was failure to recognize hazards that's insufficient for various reasons. Not only it isolates the person from the work environment, but it also doesn't allow the reader to appreciate the context within which that behavior, that decision occurred. Your recommendations then should address the error traps, align the dependency, improve the connection between the processes. And finally, when you write either the final report or the slide pack, you describe how the situation unfolded over time, given how people were dealing and adapting to the challenges and constraints that they were facing. And there is more to it, because the human factors and human performance in the context of incident investigation is not limited to the process as well, but it also plays a part in the social dynamic of what happens after something goes wrong. So imagine there was an injury, and so now it does matter how leaders respond to the incident. Do they come across as caring, or do they showing anger and frustration? And also, whose needs are being prioritized? So is it the customer needs who demands that the information must be available immediately, and therefore we are interviewing a person in the hospital while they're getting treatment and they're in the shock and in pain? Or do we prioritize their needs and we show care and let them recover, and we do everything we can to accommodate their needs, the needs of their families, and help them to recover? And depending on that, the people who we'll be talking to will experience different level of stress and trust. So stress affects things like memory and ability to recall information, but trust affects willingness to reveal. And so the lower the trust, the lower the willingness to tell the full story and the full detail, because the mistrust will be associated with self-protective behaviors, such as trying to tell the story in a way that will protect me from what I believe a threat is. Now, this will then impact the quality of information that you get from people, and that again will impact your ability to tell a story about what happened. And how you tell the story will affect the leader's understanding of what happened, but also it will trigger emotions. You may tell a story about in a way that triggers anger, or you may tell a story in a way that triggers care, understanding, and empathy. And so in a way, as an investigator, this is in your hands. Now, we know from the fascinating research on just culture and justice is that the leader's decisions about how to hold people accountable and whether to use punitive consequences or not depends on what information they have and how that information is presented to them. And so that decision about what is fair, it can be very easily controlled and manipulated. I mean, in a way that can be influenced. You can tell a story in a way that triggers anger and punitive consequences, or you may tell a story about the same event that and understanding that will trigger very different set of actions from senior leaders. And then that feeds back over time to how people perceive whether it's safe or not to talk about what happens. And if it's not safe, you will have high level of stress and self-protective behaviors that may make it difficult for you to learn. Finally, let's highlight some challenges associated with deploying or integrating this way of thinking to large organizations. And the first one is achieving shared understanding. So if you think only about those things that I shared with you today, we can think about different people who play a role in incident investigation. So for example, if you've got investigators who are trained top class and they can identify error traps and all those things to very high quality, but the leaders who sign off on the report are in a very different place and have very different mindset, focusing on blame and seeing the individual behavior as a main cause, there will be a lot of tension and pushback from leaders towards the team. And it may be likely that some of the findings may be actually redrafted, reworded, or even maybe the findings and corrective actions may be rephrased. The same may apply to legal team. So if the legal team considers a best line of defense in court, for example, to say that this accident happened because it was inexplicable behavior of this individual that has nothing to do with our organization, then it will be difficult to talk about organizational factors in the report, and so on. So we've got other people on that list that whose common shared understanding will be important in order to maximize the learning. The second challenge, and this is perhaps for large organizations, is the scale and time of deployment. So if you've got large organizations, whether nationally, regionally, or internationally, you may have hundreds, if not thousands, of employees globally among those different functions I displayed on the left that needs to have exposure to those topics and develop basic understanding and some skills. So it is a challenge to deploy it at scale, and also the longer it takes, the more difficult it is to achieve the benefits from that. And finally, what I call investigation ecosystem. So you've got training and competency is one thing, right? So whether you train people on how to identify error traps, etc. But that's just part of the picture. We can think about the puzzle that has many different pieces. And so one of those pieces will be policy requirements. So if you've got your investigations policy, or however you call it, are you requiring investigators to look into error traps and organizational factors? Is that a formal requirement? Because if it's not, then perhaps it's less likely that people will do that. Then you've got forms and templates. So if, for example, if you have this great insight into a range of contributing factors, but your final report template forces you to indicate one root cause, then of course that will affect learning, because that will prevent you from communicating and telling the story. And the same applies to the software that you use. So if you want to trend data and get insights into trends, and if that software forces you, for example, to select between a root cause, between equipment failure or human failure, and that's it, then that will obviously prevent you from learning and will affect your ability to learn. And so we've got other processes, consequent management, that may belong to HR, and what happens then, quality control of the investigation, etc. So you've got an ecosystem that needs to be taken care of. And in our example, in our case study, we've seen a situation that had 3 different companies. So that is the next level of complexity, because then you need, again, the same challenges, shared understanding, scale, and ecosystems is further extended to those organizations. So these are the challenges, and as we are advancing as an industry, we work together with different organizations to try to advance us on that journey. And one additional resource that I would like to bring to your attention is a guidance that we recently published at SPE in response to the fact that in the UK, the human factors questions are now being integrated into contract pre-qualification service. What it means in practice that if you want to work in the industry, you will have to provide answers of how you integrate human factors into risk assessment, investigations, and other processes. And so that guidance provides you with the background and also enables you to quickly compare your efforts against the industry guidance, provide some criteria of good practice and examples of outputs for those questions specifically, which are being integrated into that contractual pre-qualification service. And so this is the link. I'll display the link now in the pop-up window, so we'll be able to click on it. That link will take you to the landing page. Okay, so that is okay. So you can click on it now and download the guide after we finish. If you're watching us on demand or on YouTube, feel free to pause and type in the link or check the description for the link. Okay, so that's and we are coming to an end. What I would also like to highlight is that HPOG has already developed a number of resources which are available for you. So we've got recommended practice in investigations. I mentioned that, but we'll give you access in a moment to the document. Recommended practice on how to format procedures. Walkthrough Talkthrough, which is a tool how to predict where next mistake can happen. Task Check, if you heard about hazard hands. So this is a way to engage your workforce to proactively finding error traps in their work environment. And we also have a collection of documents published by other bodies such as Energy Institute and IOGP. So let me display that. So here we'll, okay, so there is another download. So okay, I see that people are clicking, so that's good. So we'll be able to download the zip pack with all those resources there. Finally, HPOG, it does take effort and money to continue developing this content. So please consider your organizations joining as a member, and please learn more about membership on the HPOG website or write directly to Brody using the email displayed at the bottom of the slide. Here are some additional links you may use, so whether that's eLearn and some materials published by other organizations on the topic of human factors in incident investigations. And so with this said, I wanted to thank you so much for your attention, your time today, and I look forward to answering your questions. And so I see that we've got one question from Jake. What are the best ways that you've seen for people like us to handle hardline skeptics or cynics, especially executives, regulators, or lawyers who insist on finding someone to blame for every incident? Okay, so what's the best way? I think the best way for me would be to use people. So if you look at the group of people, there will be individuals who tend to have more influence over others or over senior leaders than others. So understanding who they are would be a starting point, and then focusing on those individuals and getting them up to speed and enabling them to talk about those concepts, those ideas, and then they would share it. That probably is not enough on its own. So exposing leaders to these ideas, but through engaging workshops, conversations, dialogues, where it's not presentation as true fact, but you've got a problem and a challenge, and then you discuss with them and let them guide them how to uncover what's behind together. So those would be some techniques that come to mind when it comes to influencing. How do you move from description to intervention when you're looking at a work of systemic influences? Mark asks. Okay, so that is a different category. So if you map out the interactions and influences, then addressing one part of it is probably not enough. But I think this is for me, this is the future of the world of safety, to look at interventions at how different elements interact together rather than fixing pieces of it. So replace a procedure or replace a tool. And so, but this is also, I believe, for me, a more advanced set of tools. And I don't think that we are there yet as an industry. We're still struggling with error traps, not mentioning understanding the dynamics of the system and trying to find the points of leverage. Now, having said that, it can be done, but it is at the moment very niche area that is available. But if you're interested in learning more, learn about systems thinking interventions or large-scale interventions. Are there any plans for HPOG to publish managing rule-breaking guidance? Tahir asks. So maybe in the future, what you will see in the IOGP guide that will be published in December on learning from normal work and pre-accident investigations, we've got a section there about why people don't follow the rules, how to interpret such behavior, and different perspectives to take. And then we also talk about some actions that leaders can take, but also we contrast or we introduce the idea of restorative justice there. So Tahir, I think that would be the material I would refer you to if you can wait couple months. But if you download my guide, I will also notify you when that IOGP guidance will be available, because we'll be publishing some additional resources and tools in addition to this guidance. Paulina is asking, what do you think is the best argument against reactive discipline, where certain leaders feel the need to discipline someone for an error to make it an example for others? So touching on the organizational justice, just culture, consequence management, this is a really big topic. And there are so many elements that are hidden under that. So what worked for me is taking those leaders on a journey one step at a time. So if you've got leaders who tend to strongly believe that punitive action is the best way to, and that's the best solution, you probably won't be able to get them to understanding restorative peace and shared accountability and some of those topics. So what I would do is to engage those individuals in conversations and workshops, trying to upskill them on the concept of causality. So behavior as a cause versus behavior as an outcome or as a symptom. The basic idea of error traps, and you can use your own example. So if you see, okay, the person didn't follow procedure, but there was no procedure to follow, bringing this to their attention and highlighting that actually there are reasons why people don't follow the rules would be the first step. And then over time, you may get to exploring how the consequence and what it does. So if you take punitive consequence, what are the side effects, for example, of that? I would take that slowly, start with the helping them to discover error traps, and then the impact of it. And perhaps you can interview people who were affected by punitive action and anonymously bring that to the attention of that leader, showing that, for example, yes, you did fire 2 people last time, and since then, we stopped talking to, or frontline people stopped talking to us, so we have no clue what's happening. Those examples tend to help, but I've never seen an immediate, rapid transition. It's a journey that requires a lot of sense making for people and a lot of examples to go through. Siamzul, apologies if I mispronounced that. Great presentation. Thank you so much. How do we balance between accountability versus understanding local rationality, not to punish worker because it's organizational induced error. So this is where perhaps to help with that balance, in that IOGP guidance, we're offering two different approaches or decision flows that can help you get that balance. So you will see the questions being asked: in what way taking punitive consequence help us to learn? What's the past history of performance of that individual? So we've got a range of questions trying to challenge that notion that punitive consequence is always correct. Don't get me wrong, there may be times when it is appropriate, but starting with the punitive consequence is definitely limiting learning. So please stay tuned. And if you download my my SP guide, I will be able to notify you about this IOGP guide and point you to specific sections there. Daniela is asking, could you tell how we can use learning teams for investigations? Okay, so I probably need to add an explanation what a learning team is. So a learning team is a tool or is a technique that aims to engage people who do the work to understand what makes that work difficult for them before it leads to an event, an incident, or other type of loss. So learning team is different from investigations and has different focus. And with learning teams, what we tend to do, because we've been applying learning teams for a while now, learning teams were designed for proactive learning or pre-accident investigations to explore how challenges, constraints, and narrow traps may contribute to a problem before that problem manifests itself, but you can also use it after an incident. Perhaps the main difference would be that with typical investigation, you would start with an event. So for example, you've got a dropped object and you try to ask why it happened, and then why it happened. So you're building some sort of typically causal tree or some influence tree starting from the event, trying to explain. What that gives you is a unique combination of constraints, error traps, and other factors that aligned and contributed to that particular event. Your next event will likely have a different combination of those things. For learning team, you would not start with an event. So you would take the people who were involved with an event, but you instead of talking why the object fell, we would ask, tell me about the activity and what makes that activity difficult. So for example, we could talk about lifting or in our case, pulling out of the hole. And it's possible to do a learning team after an event without ever talking about the incident itself and still get a huge richness of insight, because on daily operations, you will have a lot of things going on, and there will be just a combination of some of those things that give rise to an incident. And if you open it up and talk about the challenges of completing the activity, you will see other things that are present, but on this occasion, either did not contribute, but could have contributed. So that would be my answer. But also the learning teams is a tool that requires additional training and skill. Is there a recommended root cause analysis tool that well covers human performance and human factors aspects? Asked Mustafa. Mustafa, what I would recommend is starting with the IOGP document called Demystifying Human Performance in Incident Investigations, and then also enroll on the Human Performance Competency Pathway and use the tools and templates that we provide there. What is important to highlight is that the tool itself is of secondary importance, because your mindset or your mental model will always trump whatever the tool you have. So you may have the best tool in the world, but if the user of the tool believes that error or unsafe act is a root cause, they will modify and interpret the information in a way to find that the error or unsafe act was a cause. So that's why it's very important. I mentioned the mindset and shared understanding. We all have our circle of understanding, and the template is of secondary. Your circle and your mindset will always take precedence over whatever tool. Therefore, the pathway may give you the broader insight, and that will enable you to use the tool, whatever the tool, more powerful. Tahir is asking, are there any plans for HPOG to, I think I've answered that question already. Okay, so this sounds like we've covered all the questions that we had. So I'll wait one more minute to see if there is anything else that people would like to ask about. And if not, then allow me to thank you again for your time, your attention, and your engagement. Feel free to reach out on LinkedIn. Let's stay connected. We are sharing lots of different resources and hints and tips on different topics. And I hope this was of use, and I look forward to working together. And I hope our paths will cross in the near future. So thank you again. Brody, back to you. And you're on mute.
Yeah, thank you very much, Marcin. Thank you for leading the webinar, and thank you to everyone for attending as well and for the questions. I don't think I'm on mute.
Okay, so I think we've got a technical glitch. So on behalf of Brody and HPOG, thank you so much for attending, and there will be follow-up communications. Thank you.
Thank you, Marcin.